Not only do I believe that a strong arts scene and community is necessary for any city to survive, I think that it's one of the key elements for a city to thrive. I definitely think it's a universally accepted understanding that when an area or a city or a population or a culture is under financial distress, that the arts funding may suffer, but quality and the level of artistic statement that is produced grows. I've seen some amazing works in the performance, visual, and literary fields emerge from Scranton. We have so many amazing punk rock bands such as the Menzingers and Title Fight and Tiger's Jaw that have emerged and grew up in that generation of the city being financially distressed. Right in the middle of that, the playwright Stephen Karam would have graduated from Scranton High, and he was just recently nominated for Pulitzer. He's currently nominated for the Tony. He's already been nominated. That's the second time he's been nominated for the Pulitzer. Most recently for his work on The Humans. You know, he has a show on Broadway, feature film adaptation work, I believe. Bradford Lorick from the greater Scranton area. Of course, those individuals and those artists, you need to expand your work beyond this region, but why is it growing from this region in particular? And I'm sure there's something you could say about the Scranton experience. There are things, for better or worse, that are so quintessentially Scranton, and that's when art is really strong.
So my role in the arts and culture scene in Scranton and Lackawanna County is we have a tax here for education and culture that was started in 2004, and it's really cool because we're the only county in the state of Pennsylvania that has it. So the nice thing is that all that funds collected go towards supporting arts and culture programming in Lackawanna County, so obviously Scranton being the seat of the county sees a fair share of that. So as the deputy director, I manage that fund, but in addition to being a grant maker, I also see myself as a facilitator. So the county arts office is a place people can contact if they have an idea or they want to collaborate. So we try to support artists and arts organizations in that way too. We host a lot of technical workshops for arts in the area. We host free programming because it is a tax-funded dollar. So we wear a lot of hats, but I think our role is really bringing people together both through funding, assistance, and I like to think inspiration. One of the best things that I've seen happening in the region since I've had this job now since 2008 is there's just an electric energy, pun intended, since we're the electric city, of just people that really believe in the city. And that's refreshing because for decades, I think there was this sort of downer attitude about Scranton. But you have groups like Scranton Made, that's a PR event planning firm for artisans that are doing events. The Pop-Up Studio started kind of an art installation group several years ago. So they're doing this really interesting work around town. The Scranton Film Festival. I mean, it's been going on a while. We were chatting earlier about the Community Film Project. I think that was an early part of the movement. When I moved back here in 2002, I chose to come back because I saw all this like energy happening, and I just think now there's a great momentum.
The thing about financially distressed or strapped cities is that inevitably some form of creativity comes out of it. Whether it's music or art or film or whatever, it usually comes from some sort of hard times, whether it's economic or personal. And I think that what's happening now, especially in Scranton, is that being that we're so financially handcuffed, is we're having to find creative ways to express ourselves. And that comes in the form of a lot of stuff like the plays and the art galleries. And 5-6 years ago there was no art galleries here. Now we have half a dozen, and it's awesome. And there's a filmmaking community kind of growing here, and there's the music here. I always compare the music here to Seattle in like the early 90s. It's just incredible, but it comes from this place of pain. And I think you have to understand what pain is to truly understand what joy means.
I don't see any of the financial problems in Scranton really interfering with what we do. If anything, it gives us a little bit more drive to travel around and not get too comfortable here and kind of see other venues. There's not that many venues here for original music. I don't think that necessarily has to do with the financial situation. It's just the taste of the area. I don't know, it's just not that big of a scene. It's a great scene. The little scene that it is here, though, it's a great scene.
The county, I got to give them credit, still does the arts and culture grants every year, which always turn out to be some really great projects that people might not even hear about most of the time. You see the grantees in the paper, and that's about it. They might not follow the projects up. But I don't, as a city, however, you don't see money left for any of that kind of stuff. They can barely pay their bills and get by. And I don't see that getting any better because I don't think we're getting the right kind of politicians in there to make that different. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I think some of them are working really hard and they have very good intentions, but I don't think they have the resources to be able to do it. Unfortunately, arts and culture and the libraries and things like that are always the first things to go when it comes to spending. So unfortunately, I don't really see that getting any better. And the thing is, on the other hand, I think that's a good thing for artists because it gives them something to feed off of. I think a lot of artists around here feed off of the fact that we're poor and we don't have as much, or we're struggling in some way or another. It gives you something to write about. It gives you something to strive for. If everybody had it good, how interesting would the drama or really be? Essentially. So.
I feel like I think that it's twofold. Honestly, I think the negative aspect of it is probably the fact that things like theater classes or going to see a piece of theater or going and buying a piece of art are, in many people's minds, the first things that are disposable. They're the first things that are disposable in schools. But I think that what that can actually contribute to the art scene is the fact that when people start to struggle and when they have problems that they have to overcome, that's oftentimes when some of the greatest art comes out. So much theater has been born of that idea of what do we do about blank, or how do we exist through this particular challenge. So for me, it's been twofold, definitely. I actually started another company, not a theater company, but an actual business to help supplement my income in '08, right before the economy went. But it was particularly because it can be very difficult to make a living as an artist. And it also helps other nonprofits raise money, which can also be a really difficult thing to do in an economic downturn when you're trying to do things like the Camp Special Needs Kids that I run. When you're asking businesses to underwrite so that these kids can come basically for free, it's a lot harder to get them to give money when the economy is down.
I know some of the ladies I work with through my business. I work with mainly women. I know that cutting some of the art programs in the schools has affected them. I have one very good friend who's a music teacher, and basically all of her programs have been cut, and she has no money to do anything, and indeed is now subbing because she can't have a full-time teaching job, and so hence she works with me as well. But so I see things like that, which is really sad.
The world is in such a financial crisis right now, and it's affected the whole way of living, and it's deeply affected the arts scene. But I believe that Scranton is coming out of that, and we're starting to grow as a community. And events such as Arts on the Square and the Italian Festival, they bring people in, and it kind of boosts our economy and our way of living.
Art around here is, a lot of the times, it was subsidized and paid for by government entities. There was grants, there was endowments, there was all this stuff, and a lot of them are gone. A lot of the after school programs are gone. A lot of the like the music programs, the art programs, they're the first things to go. And studies have shown children and people, that's why they have art therapy, is because they need an outlet. They need something to express themselves. It's otherwise you're like, oh, I have no choice because I have, thank God for drugs and alcohol. Like I need to. So there's a bar and a church on every corner here because you're either looking for Jesus or you're looking for the answers in the bottom of a glass. I think if you had art and you had an outlet.
A major element that I've experienced, and I know a lot of other artists have experienced, the rents in downtown Scranton are astronomically expensive. From my own personal experience, from little tiny artist studios to major, commercial spaces, to create a performance space, to create a gallery, to create anything. There are many generous landlords and property managers. There's many who I just think are disconnected and don't really understand that many organizations or individuals can't afford $1,500 a month, and those spaces will sit vacant for years. I would love to see a rent subsidy program. I would also love to see the abolishment of the City of Scranton mercantile tax, which, if anyone's familiar with that, it taxes on gross income, not profit, not gain, but total gross income. And not that it's that astronomical, but when you're talking about big numbers and big industry, I do think that it inhibits.
It's like a microcosm for what you see going on in the country. You know, people point at the Congress and the Senate and everything else as these major problems. It all starts at home. It all starts with local government. And you see the same problems that are happening in local government happen in larger government as well, except just blown up larger. I think that the problem is that there's a lot of elected officials, and we like to point at them as the problem, but there's also a lot of unelected officials. There's a lot of people in the city that are being paid with our taxpayer dollars that don't actually have to answer to taxpayers. I think they're a major problem, because these are people who have been in the city for 10, 20, 30 years in that same position, and they don't have any new ideas, and they're simply sinking us. So they're simply getting a paycheck and going home at 4 or 5 o'clock. These are the people that, as a reporter, you would try to get a hold of and call them up over and over again, and they just weren't there. They just weren't answering. Or you'd go to their scheduled meeting that's advertised in the paper, and they just weren't there. And you were wondering, well, what is going on behind closed doors? What's really going on?
Well, I actually think our straits here in Scranton are not as dire as maybe people at first believe. Of course, there's generally been national challenges in the arts, so I don't think the city is that different than many other places with a lot of funding cuts. We have to remember we've been climbing out of a long hole for a long time, so I see a lot of positive things happening. It's just we haven't solved those issues that you're referring to, trying to climb out of that debt and those other challenges. The city, unfortunately, doesn't have the money that the county does to support the arts, but they do still support some organizations. They give money to the Everhart. They still do free concerts in the parks. So I think they do what they can. I think the bigger challenge is trying to create, people who will support the arts themselves beyond just city funding, because it's going to take a lot more than just government funding to really become a robust arts area. Scranton is still a city that's climbing out of a legacy where it was, at one point this thriving industrial power, and then it kind of went downhill, and now we're trying to reinvent ourselves. So I think one of the challenge is, funding always, of course, to support some of the long-term organizations are here. Like you think of the Philharmonic and Broadway Theater League and the Scranton Cultural Center. How do we encourage people to support these events and attend the arts? Because we also have to understand there's a lot more choices today too. You can stay home and watch Netflix. So you're competing against a lot of things too. So I think that is still a challenge. It is still difficult, I think, especially to have a brick and mortar place as either a performing or a visual arts place. I love seeing the small boutique shops and locally made artist groups, but I know it's challenging. Again, you're trying to get consumers to purchase arts.
For artists to make money, it's nearly impossible. I see there's great local theater around here, and you see the same people show up to see the same local theater. And there's great musicians around here, and you see the same fans show up to every show. There's not enough of outreach to people who wouldn't normally check these things out, which is probably why something like Arts on the Square is a great idea, because you might get people who wouldn't normally go to those things to check it out.
It's difficult to make it as an artist. I see a lot of artists have 2 jobs to make it, but I appreciate. I'm so glad that because it's such a passion inside people that they continue and to create art and to perform despite the difficult economic situation. And artists, they love to create. They will do it no matter what. The performers love to perform. Like even with the bad economy, people still want to create art.
I would say that the challenge is to make sure that people that, and this is I think a challenge in art in general, is to make sure that people that are not the artists themselves understand how important it is and contribute and come and see the shows and buy the art and really understand how important that is to a community. That's why it's really nice to see this happening, because I think it's events like this that make people say, this is important for our community, art is important for our community, we should support it.
The most densely populated days in downtown Scranton, aside from perhaps annual events like the parade, the St. Patrick's Day Parade or La Festa Italiana, are First Fridays, which are entirely fueled by the arts and culture and downtown community specifically. I also feel that annual art events such as, and I'm biased of course, but the Scranton Fringe Festival and the Scranton Shakespeare Festival, which is about to celebrate its 5th year, bring in artists from outside of the region. For example, the Scranton Fringe Festival had in its first year in 2015, across 4 days in 12 venues, all within downtown Scranton, had 47 productions, spanning nearly 100 individual performances with artists coming from as far as California, Texas, Louisiana, Missouri, New York, across Pennsylvania, with the core, of course, making up northeastern Pennsylvania. So not only does that show we have a strong arts community here, but we can sustain others. And then up until, from that through to the Broadway Theater League, which brings in 4 to 5 main stage productions to the Scranton Cultural Center every year, from The Book of Mormon to, chestnuts like 42nd Street and Annie.
And I think it's important, more important to have things like Arts on the Square that are free for people, that they can come down and see stuff without having to pay for it. And it gets us good exposure. And then hopefully next time we play somewhere, maybe there is a cover charge or something. Maybe just a fraction of those people want to come back and see us again, and maybe then we'll get something back out of it in that way, or maybe we'll sell some CDs or T-shirts. And then I also think it's very important, though, if you're going to do something like this, to be unique and stand out. I mean, there are a lot of artists in the area, and if you want people to support it, give them something new, give them something that they want to come back for. Don't just blend in with the rest. Really give them something new and get their attention.
I think all the artists support each other. I think those people come out again and again. Anytime anybody starts a project, you see those people at all of those events. But do you see the average Joe, and do you see them spend money? Probably not. Even if they do, they come check it out, they look at it, they think, oh, this is really great, but they don't want to give $1 to it. But they'll go to the local bar, maybe spend $100 on their bar tab. So that to me, that kills me.
I think that in a city like Scranton, where it's a slightly, mostly depressed economic area, it's very difficult to sustain the arts. And the only way that people can help is if they do support events like this, or they do get out and get into their community. And it's very difficult sometimes for people to get motivated when there's a lot of negativity around the area, but you can see how successful Arts on the Square is. It takes people just to get motivated, to come look at bands, go look at First Fridays. All these things are very important, just to be supportive of the area, and you never know who's going to get that inspiration to move on and to start a band, or to, I'm pretty good at art, I'm going to try to go and get at the Alpha Gallery and show my work. So it's very important that people just kind of just get some gumption, a little bit of inside motivation to express themselves, and it could be very successful like it is today.
I still don't think we're quite there yet with in terms of, I guess, the number of people supporting the arts, although I would certainly say it's growing, and it's the people that do support the arts go wholeheartedly. And I was really happy we did a holiday marketplace last December. And the nice thing about that is I think, again, we got new people to the table, so to speak. We did it in a formerly abandoned space at the Steamtown Mall. So that was nice. I think it's just we're still climbing out of that. We need to keep creating these experiences and get people to personally invest in the arts.
That's what we need. We need more people that care. And life's complicated, I get it, but you need more people to stand up and give a damn. And they're trying, they really are. Like, I don't want to make it seem like people have, forgotten about Tom Hanks on the island. Like, people do care and they do try, but I think, they need to try harder, especially for, kids. I think that's more important because they can grow up to learn. There's a lot of lessons learned in art.
There are many people who would question the need or necessity for the arts. Half of those people, unfortunately, I don't think are ever going to be changed. I think they're locked into that mindset, and I'm really sorry for them because they're missing out on so much beauty and so much enjoyment and enrichment. And I believe anyone can change, but not everyone will. So that, shame on them, I'm sorry. The other half of that population, however, I think is simply maybe a little bit of shame on us, shame on me, shame on members of my community. I can only speak really for the theater or the film industry, specifically theater from an acting or performing or writing standpoint, but oftentimes the theater creates this perception or wall of elitism Shakespeare is beautiful, and Shakespeare is deep and meaningful and can really be accessible to the people. The Scranton Shakespeare Festival offers its programming totally free. But I think that from a marketing standpoint, we really need to be engaging better with our audiences. And I speak on behalf of the New Vintage Ensemble, and I speak on behalf of myself and the Fringe, and any other organization I'm sure would agree with me that we really need to be connecting with those people that don't appreciate the arts, but maybe someday will, about, well, why is that? Where were you taught that? You didn't just wake up one day as a child and go, the arts are useless. You were taught that, whether by their parents or by their community, or it's very often by the very circle that cries martyrdom. It's always the arts professionals and the artists and organizations that go, no one's supporting us, and then turn around and create glass walls and glass ceilings, whether it's for women or it's for minorities, or it's for a person of color, or it's for someone who's LGBT. And while I think the arts are such an inclusive, generally, community, there are pockets. There is bigotry in the arts, and there is especially intellectual bigotry, in the sense that the intellectual, academic, cultured mindset really sometimes doesn't want to lower itself to the peasant peons, which is so ridiculous, and it's so contrary to what the arts are supposed to be. So I think a lot of that, like I said, half that population, sorry, there's probably nothing I can do for you. To that other half of that population, I think we might have failed you, and I hope that there's a way to really connect with you and really reach you on a deep level.
As I said before, bringing people in who have maybe never done anything artistic into it can help people through something like struggling with money or struggling with their lives or feeling like they're not being heard. So again, getting someone who's never ever tried doing something with theater to do theater, or getting someone to do a piece of artwork, could really help people to feel better. And I feel like when a community feels better, when individuals feel better, the community begins to feel better. So that's why I think it's really important.
So there are definitely people out there and organizations who may not feel that arts matter, or that, when you're in tough financial times, they need to go. And certainly, again, after, when 2008 happened, after the crash, it is hard. Sometimes you see, well, you could feed the hungry. Why support like an orchestra? So, but I think at the heart of it, we forget that arts is something that's been around since the dawn of civilization, and it's much more than just a nicety or a luxury. I think that it's about being human.
I think in order to better the economy, art is needed. It's the way that things grow. With creativity comes life. If everything was such a cookie cutter world and people were assigned jobs, it would be boring. We wouldn't be happy, and we would just be like going through our existence. But art allows buildings to look a certain way, or toilets even, to be manufactured and produced a different way. And I'm using like this toilet as an example, but art and creativity breathes life. There's no way around it. You can't escape it. If you exclude it, then you're only making the area suffer.
I think that with especially music, the arts, everything, if you look back at like vaudeville, back when there was war times, the arts always became a huge deal because it was an outlet for people just not to be sad anymore. It was therapy, really. And it seems funny that right now we're like, not in the best of times, and yet the arts isn't kind of pulling up and bringing everyone's spirits up. The big band was around, during World War II. And it was the most happy music in the world, and everyone just got to escape their hardship for just a little while because of the wonderful art scene.
To make life worth living, people need to commune with one another, and art makes that possible in a myriad of ways. If we don't have art, if we're not supporting the arts, then life can be, pretty boring, and the people stay home and they watch their television. They're not interacting with each other. They're not coming out and, enjoying their community. I think art really builds a community, and I think that's so critical to making Scranton a livable place.
People are involved in art, they're involved in theater when they don't even know it. Like if you were to say to someone, you're never allowed to tell anybody another story, you're never allowed to tell somebody about your day or about what happened to you or express a thought or an emotion, and say to them, that's what it would be like if there was no art. Because people are contributing and creating stories and art every moment. They just aren't necessarily aware of it. So that's what art does, is it helps us to take those really human impulses, those really almost visceral, just the very base of who we are, and express it. It's that need that we have.
I don't know, my dad used to say to me, my dad worked for the people his whole working career. And when I told him I wanted to be an actress, because that's what I was before I was a writer, he told me, yes, but what good do you do? So it's something I have thought about a bit, and I think it's about quality of life. And yes, we could all go through our 70 years, if we get that long, being drones, who go to work and just be unhappy. But I think having that quality of life, having that zest, having that interest, having that self-expression, that's what the good moments in life are all about. And sharing it with your friends, sharing it with your family. I was delighted that my parents have moved from London to Scranton, in fact, and they're retiring here, and they came down to this Arts on the Square, and it's their first festival in Scranton, and they've been really impressed. So I think it adds a quality of life.
The arts in general is just a powerful tool for many things, and one of them, of course, is quality of life. And the buzzword in my industry is creative placemaking, which basically that just means the arts can contribute to creating a vibrant, cool place that people want to live, work, and play. It doesn't solve all the issues, but I think the more programs you have, the more going on, it just makes people want to be out. We have a number of festivals here now in Scranton, which I think have helped people recognize different sites like the iron furnaces, which kind of sat abandoned for a long time. And, slowly they are growing into tourist destinations. They're hosting an iron pour conference here in a couple of years, excuse me. So I think as these things start to grow, not only do the residents benefit from it, but it could almost become like a little staycation or getaway place. So then you're bringing more people to the area and hopefully ultimately, I think, getting people to move here, because I think that's what's going to make the city great again. We still need people to come here, settle down, kind of ties to what I was saying earlier, and become part of that arts base that's going to support the arts.
So we absolutely have a really incredible arts community, and I think that it increases tourism, it increases commerce in the local bars and restaurants, and almost more importantly, it creates self-esteem, because without that, that's what allows people to grow and thrive and challenge and adapt. The human race has proven if it's good at nothing else, it's at least somewhat good at adapting. But I think that in itself is the essence of the Scranton art scene, is that it will adapt and it will survive. I think the question is, how quickly can we move that evolution along by how we support it or how we detract from it? And in some ways, detracting from it will only strengthen it. And how we support it will allow it to grow into ways that I can't possibly perceive, no one can possibly perceive.